Arkhouse Telegraph. Yeah, I usually begin these videos by stating the name of the game, but this time, I'm stating the name of the creator. One thing a lot of people don't think or care about when it comes to indie games are the people or person behind them, which is interesting because I feel like the games made by these devs themselves express a lot of their ideas and understanding, and what you get is insight into the minds of some of the most creative people that you'll never meet. Arkhouse is one of those devs. They're extremely obscure, and I only found them out from listening to a stream that was playing one of their songs and checking them out. Truthfully, Arkhouse is so small, I'm not even sure if their games have much of a following, but they do have a reputation. These games usually get slapped up in reviews for their difficulty, unfairness, all sorts of such, and I knew this going in. While it's always fun and fun to play a by-the-numbers indie game, imagine one that truly does its own thing. Arkhouse games don't follow, dare I say, go against normal game design. It challenges your ideas and presents something you have never experienced before. It gives you the opportunity of bearing witness to something unforgettable. If you want a sneak peek into the mind at hand, one of the games we're looking at today, Saturn Quest Shadow of the Planetus, is marketed right off the Steam page as an 8-bit Shadow of the Colossus clone. Because having the world map exploration of games like Final Fantasy, the action exploration of games like Zelda and Ys, the climbing of games such as Spider-Man, the space shooting Can Be a Horse 2 of Zenak, and the ideas of Kabuki Quantum Fighter all combined together equals Shadow of the Colossus. This isn't some meme diagram I made, this is part of the Saturn Quest art book that you can download off Arkhouse's blog site. Arkhouse has quite a number of games, but today we're looking at the Saturn Quest series, which actually seems to be quite the departure from Arkhouse's normal games from a visual standpoint, considering their other works look like this. Yeah, this stuff rocks. The Saturn Quest series has 2 games at the moment, the first one being Shadow of the Planetus instead of Colossus, I know, and its sequel, Blast Effect. Really cool box art, by the way. So off the bat, I was prepared to dive into games that were negatively reviewed, known by very few, and these consistent negative reviews have seemingly permeated into the game design that Arkhouse Telegraph is known for. I was expecting pain coming into this, and trust me, there is a reason this is the Halloween special this year. Besides the fact y'all just said screw Halloween, and that's because there is some true horror in these games. But with all that in mind, when I finally finished these games, what I got was exactly what I was hoping for. I had an intuition that there was something special about these games, and yeah, I was right. In fact, I was perfectly on the mark. So let's get ready, because I'm about to tell you something that is truly out of this world. Happy Halloween, by the way. Saturn Quest Shadow of the Planetus was released April of 2020 by Arkhouse Telegraph. We follow the player character of Captain Navigator as he explores the planet of Saturn in order to stop the minions of an evil being known as Planetus, while also finding someone by the name of Terra. He's assisted by his personal ambassador, Roro the Mother Brain, as he climbs and shoots these massive beings potentially threatening Saturn. Saturn Quest Shadow of the Planetus might be the best game of the universe, is a quote from the author's website, which is known in-game as the G-spot of the internet. I won't dig too deep into this yet, but I'm not entirely sure if I can agree with that statement. Let's see what else is on here. Game features, phenomenal multi-bit graphics, yeah, I can see that. Terrific sounds of Jupiter. Hey wait, aren't we on Saturn? Absolute mechanical unicity? What does that even mean? Mind-breaking piece of atmosphere? Crystallized brilliance of the story? What are we about to get ourselves into? Regardless, I do find a lot of these statements to hold some bearing. I'm quite a fan of the graphical style of this game. The large sprites and animations and overall world here is very pretty to me, even if this style was seemingly a little different from Arkhouse Telegraph's norm. Just seeing Navigator's walk cycle really gave me that vibe that Arkhouse puts a lot of value into the graphics of their games, and in some ways, maybe what they are known for. Even if this retro style may not seem the most original, I still kind of felt the vibe that although what it may say, it didn't feel like it was just imitating another art style to mimic a different game. All of that I said goes to the music as well. This isn't really the kind of chiptune I've heard from anywhere else, and trust me, I listen to a lot of chiptune. I personally think it's some pretty fantastic stuff. I mean, keep in mind it was Arkhouse's music that allowed me to see these games to begin with, especially when I discovered that song titled Home from one of their other games, Cube Gothic, that actually came out after Shadow of the Planetus. That's a good song. But just walking around the colorful Saturn and jamming to the tunes is pretty nice. But then we get to the gameplay. The thing people seem to dislike about this game, and Arkhouse games in general. Gameplay wise, well, that's hard to talk about. Saturn Quest has quite a bit of gameplay styles, from overworld exploration, then you got some shooter bullet hell stuff, and honestly by the end of the game I don't know what the hell is going on. You know what? Let's cut this typical review crap. Yeah, you heard me. I feel like the only way I can properly express my feelings about my experience with Saturn Quest is to talk about my playthrough from beginning to end, because this is just the kind of game that I can only explain through my experience with it. I'm gonna be honest, even writing this script, I'm still not sure what the hell I just played. So strap in everybody. I know this is a little sudden, but tag along and see this through with me. We got a planet to save. I love this intro so much. When I saw this intro, I had a good feeling, especially the music, this being Terra's theme. It just sets up such an interesting atmosphere, and maybe the best kinds of intros are the ones that don't tell you anything. I would open up the game just to see this intro and hear this song. And I mean, you know you're about to play some real stuff when your options are new game and old game. As stated before, the game opens up with Captain Navigator and his ambassador Roro arriving in Saturn. It's here we get hit by the kind of dialogue we can expect from this game, as Roro greets the captain by saying, "Good night, Captain Navigator, you are doing great as always." We're told about Planetus and their minions' presence on Saturn, alongside someone named Terra we need to find too. Roro says to head south, and that's just what we do. I do like how this game just opens up with the player being able to move around, no long intro sequence or tutorial. It's nice to just jump in. I don't know about y'all, but I enjoy being able to find out the controls on my own, as long as they aren't overly complicated. Funnily enough, one of the control layouts is using WASD with J and K, which I thought I was the only one who played games on keyboard like that. Anyways, we exit our ship, setting foot on Saturn. This is the overworld, and it's pretty open world. The game doesn't stop you from going basically anywhere. But we head south, where we find a hologram of Roro, who tells us to keep heading south until we find the point of singularity, which I'll be honest, I had no idea what the hell that meant. I head south, but I couldn't find any portal that I was told would be there, so I went all the way back to see if I went the wrong way or something. It was only a bit later I realized that I was going the right way, I just didn't step on a certain area. Maybe this was the first sign I was heading towards trouble. A portal spawns, and it's here we battle our first minion of Planetus. The minions all have such cool designs, all being these massive creatures with some cool details in the sprite work. A big part of the boss fights in this game are about trying to figure out what the hell you're supposed to do, which you could arguably say is the entirety of this game's gameplay. I think it's pretty interesting though, especially when the dev could have just given Captain Navigator a gun and just have them be typical shoot 'em up fights. The first boss is pretty easy though, you just climb up the back. I guess this is what Arkhouse meant when they said this game was a Shadow of Colossus clone. It's here we learn Navigator's main form of attack. Remember how I said that East was brought up as an inspiration for this game? Well yeah, specifically the bump system. You attack enemy weak spots by simply running into them over and over again. This may sound like it could be pretty bad, but you never really have to run into enemies, just their weak spots. I mean, could you imagine having to run into another enemy's hitbox to try and damage them while getting hit yourself? Wouldn't that just be silly? Oh hey, it's the sequel to this game. What are you doing here? One weird thing I noticed is the turrets during this section. Typical game design taught me to find a pattern, but I just couldn't. Sometimes it fired once, sometimes twice. When does it fire? I couldn't tell ya. I guess it's a good time to bring up how death works in the game. You can only take one hit, where upon doing so you have to restart the current section, which seems to be pretty forgiving, but... Anyways, look at the visuals going on here. There's just so much happening, and this is just like the first 5 minutes of the game. Upon defeating one of the minions, we're treated to this cool cutscene announcing our victory. Wow, that's pretty sick. Roro congratulates us, saying we're doing great as always. We're told the next minion lies in the east. This is where the player begins to learn that Roro should probably be a bit more specific, because if you go east from the base, you just hit a dead end with these red crystal mountains. What you actually have to do, get ready to hear that line a lot, is go north from the ship and then east. This happens quite a few times as the game goes on. I think my favorite example of this and why I don't actually mind these directions and think they're actually pretty neat is when we're told to go to a graveyard to the south. So I go there and I don't find much, but then I head to the edge and I see a single tombstone. Hey, that must be it. But how do I access that area? That pink square? Maybe there's another one around here that would teleport me to that one, but I couldn't find it. So I went back to Roro and I realized I interpreted the text wrong. She doesn't tell us to go south, she tells us to go to the southern quadrant. What you have to understand is that Saturn is one big interconnected world to explore. The game isn't telling us to go south, it's telling us to find a way to go south. In which case you actually have to go north and then east and go on a little bit of a journey and boom, here we are. I know this may seem confusing, but this is the place the player has been before, but you never get to fully explore it, so already they'd be kinda curious to check that place again the first second they get lost. I think it's smart and it makes me feel smart. I never really felt lost to the point where I had to look up a guide or something to understand where to go, you know? Oh, hey Blast Effect, what are you doing here again? Regardless, we continue the gameplay loop of fighting bosses and returning to Roro to find the next one. Credit where it's all due, all of these bosses are completely different from one another. A memorable one for me is this one here, where you just go to this huge diving board where Captain Navigator just jumps off and dies. Mood, am I right everyone? But what you actually have to do is wait for the shadow of the minion to line up and jump off on it. And just sitting here while this mildly tense music builds up to the jump is so cool. It was going through these bosses that I began to think to myself, wow, those Steam reviews were totally wrong. This is great. Keep in mind I hadn't actually read what the reviews said at the time. At one point, Rolo tells us we need to get a horse, also known as a spaceship. This results in us experiencing the shoot 'em up style of gameplay. It's about what you would expect, but I like how the slow firing and the boss's constant movement makes it so you actually have to learn the boss's simple movement pattern to try and line up your shots correctly. I think my favorite boss is this one here. Before encountering the boss, Roro lets us know that tonight our color is green, which is a really weird thing to say, but what it means is that we'll be okay to hit our head if it's green. What? We take a walk into this cave area, where upon going a little bit in, we break open a wall, revealing an eyeball, and suddenly the boss music kicks in and we have to run out, because that cave-like structure, that was the boss. What a cool intro to the fight. And just look at all the pixel art on display here, I think this is great. The fight is super unique too. Using Roro's advice, you have to jump and hit your head on the green projectiles to hit them back. But you have to be careful of the splash damage from the landing projectiles, you won't always be able to grab the green. And keep in mind, you have to no damage all the bosses in this game, because if you get hit, you have to go back to the beginning. What a great fight. So, by now, I was having a pretty good time. I thought this game was pretty well done. Maybe people were just overreacting, right? Maybe y'all just suck at video games. It's okay, I'm not judging. After defeating several of Planetus' minions, we're told an asteroid is coming towards Saturn, so we head back to grab our spaceship, which I don't know, maybe Navigator should have just parked the spaceship nearby rather than leaving it where he found it. I guess he was just being respectful. Regardless, we get in and approach the asteroid, and also approach the beginning of the pain. This is where the cracks in this game begin to show. There were strange moments early on, such as the RNG attacks that you sometimes just couldn't dodge, but here, this is when I realized that, for my safety, I should have stopped. The first phase of this fight involves shooting open the different parts of the asteroid, where upon doing so, the real fight begins. And I died already. Okay, let's try that again. Oh. I have to do the first phase again? But this phase is just standing there and shooting, moving slightly to avoid the random smaller asteroids. This takes 35 seconds to do. You will spend more time on this boss fighting this phase than the actual fight. Just when you're beginning to learn how the fight works, you get sent back here. Imagine fighting a boss in a game, dying, and then having to sit through a 35-second loading screen to try again. So let me explain this fight. The boss has one weak point, its eye, and 3 attacks to watch out for. First is the blue ball barrage, which comes out every 4 seconds. The direction these shots go in are completely random. Next, we have the falling asteroids from the first phase. The direction, speed, and size of these asteroids are all random. Now to address the thing you've probably already noticed by now, these random as hell lasers. They're unreactable, and while I think they're supposed to be synced up to these heart-shaped things on the sides of the boss's eye, it isn't. Furthermore, these lasers come out at random times, making them almost impossible to predict. Do you see a running trend here? Let me tell you why this fight is pretty annoying. Firstly, all the RNG, or luck. Everything is too random and thusly hard to predict when it comes to the blue shots, the asteroids, and the lasers. The player has no way to do any bullet manipulation. That's a thing typical in shooter/bullet hell games, where you purposely direct projectiles aimed towards you one way so you can go the other way safely. Y'all should play Monolith, by the way, that game rocks. But here, you have no control over where any of these 3 RNG attacks go, which can thusly lead to situations where you have no choice but to take damage. And if you remember, in this game, you die in one hit. And also when you die, you have to spend 35 seconds on the asteroid fight again. And that adds up. The run I actually beat this boss in, just the second phase, took me 25 seconds. Yeah, the boring asteroid phase takes longer than the fight that's actually difficult. This fight took me 15 minutes to beat, which for a minute-long fight, that's not awful, I guess. A lot of the time I just felt like my deaths weren't always my fault, I just got unlucky. I'm totally fine with like spending an hour on a 2-minute fight per se, if I'm still having fun. But this fight, it's just more painful because I felt more frustrated than anything. And that's not even to mention that destroying one of the random asteroids, its explosion effect can hide the enemy bullets, making you take damage you can barely react to. I feel like just the footage of this fight speaks for itself. It's not awful or anything, but as I said, this is where the cracks become noticeable. Because nearly everything beyond this point gameplay wise is terrible. And I mean impressively terrible, like you aren't gonna believe what I am about to tell you. Proceed with caution, because things are about to get ugly. We defeat the final minion of Planetus. Roro tells us that we must now activate a portal on the ship to arrive at the secret station of Planetus. Upon doing so, we are teleported to a dark area, where we finally get some dialogue from Captain Navigator. This is the first time he talks, and man is he a character. He says he doesn't like dark places and calls out for help from Roro. And yeah, the dialogue does repeat here, I think it's intentional. The station lights up and Roro tells us to find 2 consoles to boot things up into safe mode. She also installs Ultra Green Night Vision mode on Navigator, so he no longer has to worry about dark places. Dark places are no more, they're green now. At least for this game. Okay, first console I go for is basically Yumaniki. You walk around this big map for like 8 minutes trying to find a console. I mainly made the mistake of assuming that both consoles were here, so I'll admit I was here longer than I should have been. But I kinda wish both consoles were here, cause the next one involves this large as hell maze with several winding paths leading to nothing, and if you touch this black stuff on the ground, yep, you're back to square one, baby. this honestly wasn't that bad. It didn't take forever, but at the same time, I wasn't really having fun. I mean, it's a goddamn maze. But we activate both consoles, opening up an area where we can take our ship and fly over to Planetus. Its final battle. Good luck, Captain. And good luck is a pretty good way to describe the rest of this game. This is where things get morbid. The first step of hell begins with the ship flying section, where you have to navigate through these small openings. The problem being everything. First, you can barely react to the ways you need to go, so yeah, trial and error, which is fine. Second, watch this. Yeah, I didn't even know what killed me. So then these enemies show up that fire at you randomly. Okay, whatever. Ignore the fact that everything going on in the background is distracting enough. 3, which you may have noticed by now, the freaking asteroids are back! And yes, they can be positioned in such a way that you can't win. You have to take damage. And you know what taking damage means in this game? Dying. And you know what that means. So yes, your run is decided for you before you even start. And also yes, the asteroids can block vision of the shots being fired at you. All this sounds bad, right? Well, it's nothing. Nothing compared to this. You finally make it through all of what I just talked about. And this happens. You might be wondering, Spacey, those unreactable lasers have a pattern, right? And yeah, the first 3 sequences do. The rest, I have to say it's pure RNG. Like, I'm not sure, but I think it is. So if you get lucky enough to survive the beginning luck hellhole, you have to survive even more RNG. And you cannot react to these lasers. You just move and don't get hit. And if you do get hit, back to the luck dodging. The asteroids are still here too, and that just causes more problems. But you know what? This 2-minute section only took me 35 minutes to complete. And it is far from the worst you will see. We do a fight against this heart boss, and after what you just experienced, you realize that everything in this godforsaken game is RNG. No need to wait on the turns to shoot, there's no pattern, just run through and pray. Though the fight against the boss is pretty cool, having to watch the eye projectiles to see where they're going. After this fight, we actually, finally, meet Terra, who we've been searching for this whole time. You remember Terra, right? Even Navigator's like, who are you again? Terra says that she's just a hologram, with the real Terra being elsewhere. Where? Well, she doesn't know. But we're here for Planetus, which is an actual planet. The dialogue starts getting really weird here. Maybe that's just the Arkhouse special, but we learn that Planetus isn't a planet, but a virus that eats planets, and we need to destroy the core of it. Terra installs a K weapon into Navigator's brain, giving us the ability to shoot once we reach the core. I have to admit that I do love the dialogue here if you speak to Terra again. So, we go through the portal to reach Planetus' core, and... Okay, so you have to destroy these blocks around the core in order to build a platform towards it. Where's the core? You don't know yet. You just have to hope you're going the right way. The issue? Everything else. The blocks that you're shooting can fire back. Which ones fire back? There's no telling. Some do, some don't. This takes a while, but I finally managed to make my way to the core, and suddenly, Planetus fires this shot. It's quiz time. Will this projectile, A, manage to be the only projectile in this game that actually has player tracking, while also having the ability to pass through walls and hitting me, causing me to go all the way back to the beginning of this nightmare section? Or B, all of the above? Things manage to get even worse because I keep shooting the platforms I jump on, which is really frustrating, and I know what you're thinking. Spacey, you little silly idiot. Stop shooting at the platforms you're jumping at. Well, I would love to, but jumping shoots. And by default, you shoot to the right, which means you have a scenario based around shooting and jumping on platforms to build a path to the boss. But jumping also shoots the platforms you're trying to jump on. But you can also shoot up, which is the strategy I went for until I realized by the time I finally made it to the platform I wanted to be at, I couldn't go anywhere because I shot everything else. But here's the kicker, I also shot all the blocks that could damage me. I couldn't die. I soft locked. This is an actual soft lock. I had to reset the game. What the hell? And all these minutes just to build a path to the boss for the boss to then shoot a super homing projectile that you may have to dodge by falling back. But you can't fall back because that means you're backtracking, and you can't do that because that involves jumping your way back to the boss. And you know what jumping means. After a while, I managed to build a path that can actually snipe the boss. I defeat it, which leads to the next phase. This one's not too bad, and you can actually do some bullet manipulation here, at least I think so. The projectiles may just be going wherever the hell they feel like at this point. The game should have ended here, it really should have, but no. There's one last phase, and it is quite likely the least fun I've had with a video game in a very long time. It is awful. So after the climbing phase, we get this cool visual. It's the same as when you normally beat the boss with the dissolving victory screen, but you're still in control. You're controlling this black square here. Oh no, not those black squares that look identical to your character. Those are background objects. This one. You get attacked by these stingray ships falling down that shoot these black lines. Oh no, not those black lines. Those are background objects. These ones. Trust me, this all begins to blend. In order to defeat the boss, you have to navigate inside the slowly scrolling down Planetus and reach this point here. There's two paths you can go. Right is easier at first until you realize after trying it for a while that you have to make some pixel perfect navigation in the end. No thanks. So go left. The problem? Everything else. Navigating the path itself is already difficult due to the small trail you have to follow, alongside the fact that the screen is always scrolling down. But the thing that kills this fight is the stingrays. You'll never believe it. They spawn from random positions, with random sizes, and shoot at random intervals. And when you have no room to move around them, you can't do anything. I'm out here trying to play the scary maze game while getting blasted by the RNG stingrays. Sometimes, and by that I mean often, the stingrays take up whole lanes that you need to drive into. Hey, did I mention the boss is slowly scrolling down? And of course, when you die, you have to start from the beginning. Yep, waiting for the boss to slowly appear just so you can roll the dice once more. Oftentimes, attempts won't even let you play the game. There were times where due to the stingray RNG, I never got the opportunity to even enter the path to the boss. The screen just kept scrolling down all the way and killing me. This boss fight took me over an hour, and throughout it, I was steamed coral. I had so many mean thoughts. You will probably never see me this angry. It made me realize some things. This game was awesome for the first 3/4 of it, but why does the ending suck? Because this is what difficulty is. The game has to get harder as it goes on, and this is how the developer thinks difficulty is. Just add more RNG. Yeah, it's harder, but it's not funner. This isn't why people play hard games. They want to learn, get better at certain encounters. But there's nothing to learn here. You get lucky or you die. This may take people longer than an hour. It just depends on when you get that run. I've never played a game before that was so frustrating and hard that it was boring. Like, what an uninteresting way to add difficulty to a game. And I got a feeling it was handled like this because it was easy. This game was made in Game Maker. I myself have made games in Game Maker a super long time ago in a way older version, and I've made some shooter bullet hell games. I know how this was made. It's super easy. Even truly hard Flash games managed to be more fair than this, because at least you're learning. And the fact that the dev thought that this was okay, that they proceeded to never go back to address this part of the game that people clearly didn't like, and made a whole sequel, excuse my language, but yikes. But maybe the part that hurts me the most is that the dev didn't intend for this to be trolling and frustrating. This part should have been super cool. The music is fantastic. Approaching this massive entity is such a cool visual, alongside the visual theme of what would be playing the victory screen. But the actual fight misses, and it misses so hard. Maybe the most frustrating thing about this game is the fact that it could have been good. We defeat the boss, with once again the visual theme shows as the boss dissolves and the player victory text we're used to appears. The ending displays the Pioneer plaque floating through space. If you don't know, the Pioneer plaque were plaques placed on two spacecrafts back in 1972, Pioneer 10 and 11. The information on it was purely pictorial, with the intention of it to be received by extraterrestrial life that could interpret it and locate us. Why is it here? I've honestly thought about it a lot, and I'm not entirely sure. Sometimes I feel like this game is trying to say something, but I just can't hear it. We see the two figures from the opening of the game, who are actually Navigator and Roro. As the two drift in space, Roro goes to grab Navigator, and the two teleport away, ending the game. So, overall, what did I think? Well, it's hard to call Shadow of Planetus a bad game when you consider most of the content is the good parts. However, I found that I spent most of my time with the game in the bad parts. Seriously, it took roughly an hour to get through the first 3 quarters of the game, but the last quarter, I got nearly 2 hours of footage of that. And if the bad parts are the parts that I didn't enjoy, well, then I can definitely conclude that I spent most of my time playing this game not having fun. Reporting to the Steam reviews, albeit small in quantity, managed to be similar in response. The ending of this game shouldn't have been as rough as it was. But all it took was just a few small things that ultimately ruined it for me. Cause what's here is a game with amazing everything, even gameplay, in the first 3 quarters. But then they dropped the gameplay near the end. And maybe this game is a good example that you can have the best music and visuals in the world, but if your gameplay isn't fun, most people aren't even gonna bother finishing it. So you might be thinking with my feelings towards Shadow of Planetus, I wouldn't bother playing the sequel, Saturn Quest Blast Effect. And well, for one, I bought both games at the same time. We're talking about the sequel. I told myself no matter what to see this through. And for 2, well, I don't think I ever said I hated Shadow of Planetus. I think it's alright. I like it, but it isn't something I would recommend to many. Before we move on to the sequel, Blast Effect, I want to return to Arkhouse Telegraph. Shadow of Planetus came with a downloadable art book. I didn't read it before because I heard there were spoilers for the game, so let me show you some cool stuff in it now that we've been in it. It was by reading this that I remember that this isn't some trolley game made for laughs. This game has love put into it, and was loved by its creator. For example, the art book makes this joke about all these different systems you can play the game on, proceeding to show all these mock-up references to these fictional consoles. How cool is that? There's also stuff like showing full maps and sketches. Definitely some cool stuff. This didn't have to be made, you know. I dug around the site and I looked at how Arkhouse would respond to comments. And they say in one of these comments that they would never make something that they wouldn't enjoy. I'm just like, wait. You thought that was enjoyable? Now I'm curious. I went into Blast Effect rather excited, because there is so much to love about Shadow of Planetus. If they just get the gameplay right for the full duration, I think this could be something truly great. I mean, the first game has already left its unforgettable mark with the last screen, but maybe I could remember Blast Effect in a positive light. And well, Saturn Quest, Blast Effect is a much different game than the first one. Saturn Quest Blast Effect was released in January of 2021. Considering that the first game was released in early 2020, you might think that this is a pretty short release window, but then you realize that Arkhouse released another game, Cube Gothic, after Shadow of Planetus, and then you realize that Blast Effect was made in 3 months. Blast Effect takes place after the events of SOP, where now Captain Navigator, known as the Legend of the Stars, and his personal ambassador Roro are searching for the source of Planetus. Once again, love this title screen. Arkhouse really does just have their own style. Even with the haunting chiptune music, I don't think I'll ever forget the first 4 notes of the title theme. Also, in case if you're wondering, load game this time is now known as Time Paradox. All of what I have to say about the graphics and music is largely the same here, but gameplay, tone, story, that's where things get different. So let's jump in. The game begins as there seems to be an emergency on their ship. As Captain Navigator is released from his pod, we explore around the ship, and let me tell you, I love the music here. The ship theme is great. We encounter Roro, looking slightly different from before. And I'll tell you right off the bat, the dialogue and story of this game might be the highlight for me. Unlike the first game, Navigator and Roro interact and talk a lot. And I just love everything they have to say. Captain, copy, Roro, copy, paste. It's so good, alongside the ultra zoomed in portraits. I love Navigator in general, which is why it's a shame that he didn't talk as much in the first game. Talking to Roro, we're told that we're under attack by an entity known as Bionomus, which for some reason Navigator just calls Bionom for the rest of the game. And an interesting twist, it turns out in this 8-bit universe, Bionomus is a 16-bit life form, unlike anything we've seen or fought so far. Something truly alien to this world. We also learn that Terra, ideally the real Terra, is in Bionomus, so with a full plan of frontal assault, we go off. Upon going to the ship, however, Navigator glitches out of the world, arriving in some strange void. As we explore the area, we encounter Terra. She tells us we're in Meganet, which the captain doesn't believe, as he seems to be the only one unable to connect to Meganet. It rejects him, even to the point of what Navigator sees Meganet as is different to what Terra sees. Listen, there's going to be a lot of story stuff I have to explain here, and I can tell you I'm not going to do a very good job at it, but I'm going to try to explain what's going on. Meganet is some virtual world that people connect to every day. It's an interpretation of one's spiritual life, a representation of who one is. It's kind of real, but it's not. We're not even 10 minutes into this game, by the way. Terra tells us that she's a planetarian, twin to that of Planetus, in her cocoon, waiting to be reborn. Before we can get any answers on where Terra really is, she begins to glitch out, and so do we, teleporting out of the Meganet. We tell Roro about this, who seems to confirm that we weren't actually in Meganet, but a copy-pasted version of it from Bionomus. Alright, okay. You know what? Let's just pew-pew this 16-bit jerk. Yeah, I know, this game begins with a ship shooting section. I was already scared. Ship play is largely the same, but Navigator shoots much faster, and the biggest addition to this game is that you can now take 3 hits before death. I like the hit notification too. It's very non-intrusive and stylish. And in case if you're wondering how I feel about being able to take damage 3 times before death, well, for a little foreshadowing, let me just say if that wasn't a thing, I probably wouldn't have finished this game. I think one of the coolest things about this game is the battling of these 16-bit life forms, seeing this clash of art styles between this 8-bit character and these 16-bit enemies and environments. It permeates throughout the game, and I think it's pretty unique. We encounter Bionomus, but are unable to attack it, so we teleport back. Roro says that Bionomus has weak points on different sides of its body, so we're going to need a smaller spaceship that can be remote controlled. Navigator is devastated that he has to use a remote controlled spaceship, saying that it's not fair. Truly the saddest thing he's ever heard in his entire life. We're now in control of the smallest ship, where the game controls more like asteroids. You all know what asteroids is, right? It controls like micro machines? You know what that is, right? It controls like an RC car, okay? There's a lot of momentum when trying to stop, but if you shoot, you can stop on a dime, which is pretty helpful. In order to find the 3 weak points of Bionomus, we have to shoot at it until we find a part that we can break open, revealing the spot to shoot. Upon doing so, we return back to Roro. Now that we've done enough damage, the shield around it should be taken out. Every once in a while, Captain Navigator has some oddly cool dialogue. Like, dang, he's cool. So now we have to find a way inside Bionom and find Terra somewhere inside it. Trust me, I am skipping a lot of dialogue here. Once again, we ride out. Even though the enemy attacks are still kinda random, it feels a lot more lenient with the extra health. This is nice. Though funnily enough, we're actually kinda nearing the end of this style of gameplay already. We do enough damage to enter Bionomus, and let me ask you a question. Watch the beginning of this section. Did you get hit? I feel like that little moment right there describes Saturn Quest in a nutshell. Easy, manageable dodge, and unreactable pain. It's upon reaching the boss of this area that I realized that this is a much different game visually. Like, this is some horrifying pixel art, a lot different from the Colossus golem-like enemies from the first game. This is some pure 16-bit horror. Upon claiming victory upon the boss, Captain Navigator is suddenly crushed between walls, and just like that, this style of ship gameplay is gone for the rest of the game. In some ways, this game kind of opens up with killing that part of gameplay from the first one. We arrive back in Meganet, or well, the fake Meganet, seemingly still alive. Navigator thinks Terra must have saved him and goes to find her. It's kind of unfortunate that a large portion of this game will end up taking place here, as Navigator says it is pretty dull. This is also arguably where the guide aspect of the game comes to play. I got lost here for a while just exploring around and trying to find something to do. I hate to admit it, but it became so bad, I had to look up a walkthrough. I know, but I ran out of options. But watch. This is what you have to do. You're not going to believe this. Watch. Yeah. The wildest part is I actually went over to this area several times while I was lost. You may not have noticed this, but these walls you can pass through over here are slightly flashing. What? You didn't see it? You didn't see it from the zoomed out screen? Oops. Moving along, we go across this unnecessarily long invisible bridge section that I'm only bringing up so you can feel like your time was wasted too. This leads us to the first boss fight where we have to fight on foot. This game has an odd fetish for flashing white lights. I'm doing my best for editing this stuff, but sometimes the visuals in general in this game feels like an eye hazard. 2, you might be wondering, how do we fight the boss? Oh, we use the K weapon that Terra gives us, right? Nope, it's East, baby. Remember how I said that bumping into an enemy with a hitbox on their own is a bad idea? Well, that's what this is. I really tried my best to understand how the bump system works, because you will be using it to attack for a majority of the enemies. But the fact that even by the end of this game I didn't understand it, means there might be a problem somewhere. From what I get though, when Saturn is moving, he's a walking hitbox, so you collide with enemies to deal damage. Okay, but if you stay inside an enemy's hitbox for too long, you still take damage. But then sometimes you collide with an enemy and take damage anyways. And hey, did I mention that this game is a bullet hell? Far more than the original, and there's no tank and spank either. Iframes upon taking damage are basically non-existent, so getting bomboed to death is actually pretty common. I think it's kinda whack, but it does stand out, which in some ways makes it pretty cool. But you could arguably say is my one sentence review for Saturn Quest 2. Anyways, I just want you to know that once we beat the boss, you have to go back through the invisible path section again. See, I can pad my stuff out too. You like that? This process kind of continues with us traveling through the fake Meganet and fighting bosses to open up new paths. Some of these fights are pretty neat, and it definitely feels less RNG than the last Saturn Quest, though maybe it's balanced out by the fact that your main method of attacking is RNG. One of the fights is even against Planetus. Yeah, it just comes out of nowhere. The conversation had farther paints a confusing picture about Captain Navigator, as he's the only one not affected by Planetus' virus. Navigator thinks it has something to do with his race, with him being the last Saturo, but isn't entirely sure. With the power of Navigator's Master Blaster attack! Planetus actually goes down as one of the easier bosses in this game, which maybe just goes to show the threat we're dealing with the other encounters. Also, look! Reactable lasers? We truly have come far. It's after beating Planetus that we encounter Terra once more. Navigator tells Terra that none of this is real, and that she's been swallowed by Bio Nom Nom, that there is no cocoon, and that she isn't going to be reborn as a planet as she is destined to be. Terra wonders if she is dead, insinuating that Navigator might just be as well after witnessing his ship being crushed. But then, Navigator shoots back with one of my favorite lines in this game. Ha! They say it all the time, and yet I survive. It's what I do, Terra. I survive. God, he's so cool. But he brings it up as a fact, that it seems like truly nothing can hurt him. Terra vows to help the captain before glitching out once more as we're brought back to where the ship was smashed. Navigator confirms that he is still alive and says farewell to his ship. He's aiming towards the core of Bionomus once more, even hoping that it won't be dark there considering he doesn't like dark places. After spending a minute waiting to get good RNG on this turn in my way, yeah, I don't know what to say about this either, but we find an opening and enter. This leads to the reddish inside of Bionomus. So we explore around and we end up... Okay. These 2D sections can be potentially the worst parts of the game. This one only took me like 7 minutes, but there's one way later that is straight up fascinating in design. They're big screens that you have to navigate. Navigator gets a bomb power up to help blow open walls and defeat enemies. The scary part is, if you take 3 hits, you have to start all the way back. But isn't this cool? Do you see how many gameplay styles we've gone through so far? Saturn Quest lives to throw so many things at you that you'll never know what's coming up next. There's a tough but fun boss here where you learn that your bomb hitbox range is rather deceiving. By the way, I haven't mentioned this yet, but I love the boss song for this game too. These slime enemies on the ground are pretty interesting too, lighting up into a pillar, but you can easily walk over them. It's just a matter of finding the right time to do so. We defeat the boss, where I realize the background kind of looks like a freakish skull. Like, do you see the 2 eye holes at the top section over here? This game has some brilliantly grotesque visuals. As we progress, Navigator ends up getting kind of lost, which is funny because usually it's me getting lost in this game. But we find one of Roro's holograms she sent out. She says that we can build us a new ship, the PP Wing. Sorry, had to pause in case if anyone laughed at that. I ain't judging. But it's here that Roro reveals something serious, that she has been infected by Planetus. This happened a year ago, likely during the events of Shadow of Planetus. Navigator gets upset that he can't be infected like everyone else, that he can't die like them. He begins to become hopeless upon the world they are living in as it's being swallowed, but Roro says that Navigator is the only chance this world has, and she's trying to help him with what time she has left. She sends Navigator away on the new ship. This leads to another gameplay section, which thankfully only takes place here. The P-Wing can shoot out a bomb that moves mimicking the player's controls, however it's slightly faster, and you have to use this attack to strike down several weak points of Bionomus while also protecting yourself against these rush down pink orbs. It's tough, and death sends you back to the beginning of this section, as this is once again another massive screen, but it's also pretty interesting. Like, I'm thinking in ways that I never thought I would have to. It's upon defeating everything here that this weird thing in the middle opens up, allowing us access. We enter in, only to get crunched once more, sending us back to the fake Meganet. Also, I haven't brought this up yet, but if you pause the game, you get this neat stats page on Navigator. Cool. Anyways, we're immediately hit with an invisible wall maze. At the very least, you can see the walls when you bump into them, but still. This really does solidify the Meganet portions of this game likely being my least favorite part. Trust me when I say I am skipping a lot. Like, this teleport maze here came from hell. But after that, we encounter Tapu Tapas, who declares hatred upon all Saturos. They are a Venu, like Venus, that were sent to Saturn to work as slaves, which, alright. Regardless, we don't have time for this, so a fight it is. This fight seems pretty easy at first, but just when you think it's over, this is a very neat callback to the first game, as this is the first time we've gotten this gameplay of climbing on these Colossus-like beings. What's neat is that the name of this boss is Tapu Tapas, which is the same name as the first boss you fight in Shadow of the Planetus. And just the visual and sprite work here is so phenomenal, though this part is kinda completely ruined due to the fact that it actually got me super activating my motion sickness. While I may be hyping it up now, I felt miserable during this part. It was this combined with all the flashing that really made me wish the game devs cared more for unfortunate people like me. It's definitely a tough fight, especially when you feel nauseous throughout the whole experience, but defeating Tapu Tapas results in, well, just watch. This is the only time the game has ever done this. And I don't know, something about this being all a callback to the first game, along with learning about the Satoru before the fight, and seeing the planet of Saturn in the background during this all, it's kind of brilliant, you know? Afterwards, the style persists as we're in control of Navigator, this black square here. Oh no, not that one. That's the background up. Okay, I already made my point before with this crap. As you would imagine, I was kind of sweating here, like, oh no, not again. The form of Bionomus descends down, and we have to navigate inside it to find a way out. And you know what? I'd probably complain about this more if I died here and had to go back, but I didn't. So I can happily say that this wasn't as bad as the last phase of the final boss of the first game. Like that means anything. But trust me, pain is coming soon. We go through a bullet hell section, activating consoles, and eventually reaching a fake version of the V-33, the ship we started on at the beginning of this game. And by exploring around, we... Oh god. Okay, so this might be the most painful part of this game. That or the second most painful. We'll get to the other one soon. So once again, we're in this 2D format, planting bombs and destroying walls and enemies. But this one requires a lot of backtracking. It takes a while, to the point where I say if you take damage within the first like 5 to 10 minutes, you might as well reset. And check this out. One of the most morbidly fascinating things about Saturn Quest, and perhaps Arkhouse games in general, is what weird quirky design it's used to torture you next. Like, it's always something so strange. So, you see these lasers here? They fire twice, they turn off, you pass through, right? Wait, what? Did this one fire a third time? What's happening? Okay, so get this. You aren't going to believe this one. The lasers desync. Sometimes they fire 3, sometimes they fire 2. But the third shot is usually really glitchy looking. Like the frame of the laser will show up for like 1 frame and then disappear, but it will still damage you. Like, how am I supposed to explain this? Just look at it. There is no way not to see this after the first set of lasers, and the longer you're on the screen, the weirder they get. I can only assume the devs saw this assumedly unintentional action upon these actors and simply said, wait, that's actually pretty cool. So basically, I just waited until the third laser appears to pass through. And if it only shot 2 lasers, well then I would just wait for it to bug out so the third laser could come out. Remember, you only get 3 hits on this, and death completely resets the room and your progress. And if you want to know how long this was, it took me around 20 minutes total in attempts. Just for this one screen, and the run I actually made it to took me 14 minutes, so this could have gone on way longer. But I'm kind of a gamer, maybe even a gamester if you will. I know, keep the praise down, I can hear you from here. Funnily enough, the run I made it, I didn't even take damage, so I might have to sign up for a professional team sometime. Interestingly though, while navigating this section we get messages from Bionomus, but declaring itself as Bionomnom, as if Navigator's name for it was correct all along. I wonder why that is. Well, things are about to burst open, and the truth is prepared to be revealed. So if you have any interest in playing, okay, you know what? These games are kind of painful to play through, but I'm really glad I did, to the point where I kind of pity you all who are only experiencing it through watching. Even while writing this script, I feel like there's a connection I have with this game when I speak about it that you all simply can't see, not without experiencing it on your own. But I'm not trying to guilt trip you or anything. If this doesn't look like something you would want to play or enjoy, then that's fine. You'll likely gain a lot more just from watching me talk about it. In the end, my work is primarily for myself, but I also strive to make other people happy. And I don't want y'all getting upset because I may have forced you to buy this game that you might not like. Just consider, okay? Alright. We're moving on. Who's next? Who's next? You? Come on, don't even try to swing at me, because you're done. We finally encounter Bionomnom, who strangely enough looks just like Navigator. When asked why, Bionomnom seems to know something about Navigator that he has forgotten himself. He shows this, briefly flashing an image of Navigator in a container, body ripped apart. More images flash up of Navigator's mutilated corpse, moving down some sort of conveyor belt. Navigator is enraged by this mental assault and decides to end this now. Bionomno just sits at the top and fires projectiles in random directions, you know, typical Saturn Quest stuff. But then these eyes appear. It's hard to describe, but they track the player's directions. Some of them do it the opposite way of the player's movements, while some completely mimic them. They eventually explode into a circle of projectiles. Trying to navigate around these, I'm not going to make a joke about using Navigator in a sentence, stop waiting for me to do so. It's tricky to move around these, but you find out tricks such as how they have screen wrap, so you can cause them to be split to the other side of the screen. It makes this fight pretty interesting, as not only do you have to focus on these eyeballs, you also have to focus on dodging the projectiles and trying to destroy the 3 weak points. But in the end, Captain Navigator is victorious. Navigator moves on as Bionomnom appears from a distance watching. They comment and wonder of how Navigator has changed, saying that it is one of their destinies to destroy the world, even calling him brother. Huh. Alright, we're at the final boss. And oh god, let me tell ya, are you ready for this? We climb up whatever this is as the rest of Bionomnus explodes, leading to the final boss. It's a nude, kinda decaying version of Terra. It's funny that out of all the disturbing imagery here, I have to put a blur filter over basically unchanged female body parts. Like, I don't get it. You can show extreme violence, limbs being ripped off and all that, but you show a single pixelated titty, you just upset some random gray heads from the 1900s and now it's time to pay. I don't know, maybe I could get away with not blurring this, but also a part of me just kinda wants to blur all of this, because it really is such a big moment of the game. And it's also just easier to do it than just manually blurring certain parts. I don't know what I'll do in editing, but when I talk about this game being something I'll never forget, it's the game ending with this. The fight itself is pretty painful though. Like, you just get blasted by projectiles from all directions. And some of these projectiles have some of the strangest patterns and trajectories I have ever seen. I still don't understand them. My only theory is that they shoot out and move around randomly, but for like 1 second, they track the player, but then return to moving around these wave-like motions. And with Navigator's slow crawl speed, well, you're going to die a lot here. It's arguably very luck-based. I mean, the run where I beat the boss, I didn't even get hit at all. And I even remember in that run thinking about how lucky I was because all the turns just kept randomly shooting away from me. But this is Saturn Quest, so of course after beating this phase, we go to the next. And this is the final phase, trust me. The fight starts with us having to move around these enemies that sort of look like Planetus, that shoot out clusters of projectiles in, of course, completely random directions. You're basically forced to take damage here, so just take the hit and move on. The boss is hidden behind this gate here, where upon destroying it you get ambushed by 1,000,003 projectiles. A nice little bit of trial and error there for the fans in the back, I see ya. With death of course setting us back to the RNG projectile spam enemies at the beginning. The fight itself is against this form of Terra, known as Terranigma, which is a cute reference, and you have to damage them while trying to avoid quite literally everything else this game has thrown at you so far. There's a moving teleporter with a weak point that will teleport you to a damaging floor. There's the homing pink balls, those exploding eyeballs that follow your movements, side lasers, everybody is here. Things kind of get BS near the end as every time you hit the boss, projectile spam is launched at you, and as you would imagine they all shoot out in random directions, and if your RNG is bad, they can straight up form an unwinnable wall that will combo you to death, having to start everything from the beginning. But other than that, I think this is probably the best fight in all of Saturn Quest. And the music? Oh my god, the music! So good. The way it ramps up in intensity as more projectiles spawn and the fight becomes increasingly desperate is beautiful. It doesn't feel like a song being used as the final boss theme, it feels like a song made to be the final boss theme. I'm really glad this game could end on such a good fight. Maybe all the pain was worth it. Terranigma is defeated. It's here we meet Terra once more, and the truth is to be revealed. I'm going to try my best to explain this. So when we first met Terra in Shadow of Planetus, she said she was a hologram, and that the real Terra was somewhere else. But as it turns out, she still is a hologram, and she hasn't technically been born yet. She's from an entirely different universe, and there, she's dreaming, and it's through those dreams that she sees Captain Navigator, because that is her ability to dream past worlds and influence them. And as of now, the Captain doesn't truly exist in the real world, but only exists in Terra's dream. Thusly, when Terra soon wakes up, Navigator will stop existing. When asked if this is the end for him, Terra responds by saying that he will exist once more when she sleeps again. And it is when this happens that Navigator will be able to leave her dreams, as it will be the last day of his universe, and it is then that it will be his chance to save it. The two of them determine that when that day comes, Navigator will be ready to save his universe. But as for now, Terra must awake to help stop a war happening in her universe, the one where she is a planet. Bionomus is destroyed. Everything else may have been lost, but a single message remains. Mission accomplished. Even the Pioneer plaque can be seen spinning through space in the bottom corner there. Roro exits the V-33 and calls out for the captain. We then get a flashback to a station known as the Universal Polo ZX-9014. We see inside all sorts of life forms kept in tubes. Roro is giving her last words before being executed from the Great Badurator. She is seemingly guilty of some crime, but we do not know what. However, she gives herself a reason to live. Nobody can control the Saturo but her. She would like to perform a test on Saturn-7, which is currently infected with Planetus and full of furious Venu, being the perfect testing ground for Saturo. It seems they come to agreement. That is until it seems there's some sort of breach, and it's Navigator, who seems to be a being mentioned in prophecies as the Legend of the Stars. Navigator drops down and is here to save Roro. He turns to Badurator and hits him with the objection, "Ta-ta-ta, Master Blaster, Mega Power!" With Navigator already destroying the anti-net barriers, he and Roro are allowed to teleport out of there. Badurator comments on Navigator being the savior to the dying world as the two escape. They talk about where they're going, as this seems to be right before the beginning of Shadow of the Planetus, mentioning Terra and even bringing up Bionomus in the future. Back in the present, we see the V-33 shutting down. Roro, being distorted by Planetus' virus, vows to find Captain Navigator no matter what. And that is the end of Saturn Quest Blast Effect. So I'm going to try to explain the story of Saturn Quest thus far from how I understand it. I may be wrong. In fact, scratch that. I will be wrong. A prophecy states that a Legend of the Stars will be the one to save the dying universe. This legend turns out to be Captain Navigator, the last of the race known as Saturo. So the scenes Bionomus shows us seems to imply that Captain Navigator was either killed in his attempt to escape the Parlapopo, where he was then taken over by the dream version of himself, or he was manufactured there. I'm not entirely sure, but maybe the most likely answer is that he was created when Terra fell asleep, and was found as the last remaining person of a thought to be extinct race. The fact that he can't be infected by Planetus and isn't allowed in Meganet seems to imply this. Maybe he was taken and put in one of those tubes, and maybe he was tested on or something, but it seems no matter how many times he died, he never really died. Maybe in that case Bionomnom is a representation of his deaths, but we'll get to that later. Navigator seems to be a being that was just suddenly made, as during Blast Effect he comments on how he barely knows who he is and doesn't even have a real name. Regardless, someone known as Roro the Mother Brain is about to be executed, but has a winning card in the form of being able to influence and or control Saturo, which it just so happens that the person that the Legend of the Stars prophecy foretells is a Saturo. She makes the plan to go to Navigator's home planet. This starts Shadow of Planetus. The plan here is to test Navigator's capabilities. So Roro tells him that by defeating the minions of Planetus, he will be able to save his planet. But in reality, these minions were the Venu, slaves to the Saturo that finally escaped. They weren't related to Planetus at all. Though it is by killing them we're able to access Planetus' secret base, but this could also have just all been Roro making this up, and having the ability to go here from the very beginning. I mean, she does use holograms and teleportation as her powers. The secondary part of the plan is to contact someone by the name of Terra, who seems interested in talking to Navigator and seems to be in a different version of Meganet. What's Meganet? I don't really know. Judging by dialogue, it's a world within the world that everyone but Navigator can access, and is seen differently by everyone based on who they are. It also may hold powers for some, considering Roro couldn't teleport out of Parlapopo until the net barriers were gone. But I don't know if net and Meganet are the same thing. I think they might be, I couldn't tell you. But anyways, Navigator ends up killing the rest of the Vino with Roro's encouragement, passing this training program. On his way to encounter Planetus, he finds Terra, but Terra remarks that this isn't the real her, rather just a hologram, as the real one seems to be somewhere outside of the net. Meganet? Navigator defeats Planetus, proving that he is capable of handling their next mission, which is to stop Bionomus. The Pioneer plaque may just be a reference to how this is a humanless world, and maybe all the humans have died off, and that is what's left of them, something lost in space, ignored by all. A majority of Blast Effect takes place in Bionomus, in the fake Meganet. I'm not entirely sure why he randomly gets teleported to the fake Meganet. He thinks it might be Terra, and I thinks it might be Terra. Bionomus itself is a large, growing 16-bit mass that seems to copy things, whether it be people or memories. This is why Bionomus' name changes to Bionomnom, because it is copying what Navigator thinks its name is, and with how long Navigator spends the game in there, it probably influences Bionomus a lot. A lot of the enemies here could just be copies. Like, that's not the real Planetus, that's just a copy from either the mind of Terra or the Navigator. Maybe even that Vino you fight isn't real. I'm not sure about the whole Bionomnom brother thing and how one of them will end up destroying the world and all that. That's for Saturn Quest 3 to answer. The reason why the final boss is Terra is because this is the version of Terra copied by Bionomus. This Terra had the ideal that this is the real Meganet and that she will wake up as a planet. But because this was a copied version of Meganet, what was produced was a copy of what she thought she would end up being, as Meganet in general is a place reflective of oneself. So Bionomus copied that reflective idea and created a life form of it, thusly many different versions of Terra that we fight. I may be wrong on everything here, but then we encounter the real Terra, and you know how it all goes from there. So yeah, my head hurts a little, but as you can clearly tell, I was invested with the story. Blast Effect was definitely a step up from the first game, an arguably bigger game, despite me actually taking longer to beat the first game. I enjoyed it a lot more. Like, I can actually recommend this one. In both gameplay and story, the game always kept you guessing. And sure, there are some weird and silly areas, but maybe that's what makes these games by Arkhouse what they are. Maybe I can't necessarily call these games good in a fun gameplay sense, but they are in the sense that they're interesting. Maybe in some ways, Shadow of Planetus really is the greatest game of the universe. Much like with the first game, Blast Effect comes with an art book as well. It's full of a ton of cool things, like once again we get the different box arts for all the different systems, we get character stat pages like that one Navigator gets when you pause the game, alongside sketches and the like. Maybe the most interesting is that we get a peek on the future plans for the series, involving both a trilogy and a hexology. There's even some sketches to represent the future games. I remember reading somewhere that Ark wanted to create an RPG, and this future game looks like one. Can you imagine an Arkhouse Telegraph RPG? Like, by the end of the game, all attacks will either crit or miss. Destiny Star was planned for 2021, but considering that Arkhouse has a multitude of games they've said they want to get done before that, I have a feeling that may not happen. Though I guess you never know, huh? Game developers like Arkhouse Telegraph are why I love indie games. When games are indie, there are no expectations, no widespread coverage, no rules or laws to follow. It can be anything, by anyone. It doesn't need to cater to anyone but the creator. And through that, you end up seeing the work of minds held back by no restrictions. While my playthroughs of the Saturn Quest games were overall pretty unenjoyable, it was still a unique experience, something fresh, something I haven't tried before from an inventive mind. And I think that's something I personally value more than having fun. Even though there was pain, I still remember that pain in an overall positive light, because it was interesting. And it's experiences like these that lead towards games that you will never forget. I think Saturn Quest falls in that line, and maybe Arkhouse games in general. Sure, it's kind of painful, but wow, does it feel like there's nothing else like it out there. I'm not sure if I can recommend these games, but I remember reading a review where someone said that playing through an Arkhouse game, it's always worth seeing it through to the end. And while at first I didn't really agree with it, I really do now. I even remember someone complaining about one of Arkhouse's games, to which they replied with, "Yeah, that's the point." And yeah, that's awesome. I'm not sure if I'll ever play these games again, but I will play the rest of the series when it's made sometime. I have no regrets here. Being able to play games from and learn about this extremely obscure indie creator walking with the beat of their own drum in this small spot on the internet, yeah, that's good. Maybe in some ways the internet really is like space. So much so few have seen. I guess the best way I can end this video off is with a quote from Arkhouse. It's the one that they put in their bio, and I think it describes things better than I could ever. Arkhouse Telegraph is a video game developer, artist, and composer from Lithuania. I make video games because I believe they are beautiful.